Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalat, wassalam, Rasulullah. Welcome to day 6 of our Dhul Hijjah project, and it is finding Khushoo in your prayer. That's the topic for today. And Bismillah, walhamdulillah, every time. Wassalat, wassalam. I turned it off quicker this time. Yeah, so as I described it, my mind keeps wandering. I find it hard to concentrate. All the things I have to do, haven't done, may have forgotten, come rushing to the surface as soon as I say Allahu Akbar. What can I do? So join me today, inshallah, and I'm going to share with you how you can have more khushur in your prayer. But a big disclaimer before we get into it is I am no expert at having like wonderful khushu in prayer. I have as many challenges as anybody else when it comes to that. But what I share with you of the nature of thought today will help you understand what's going on and perhaps mean that you can get back into that concentration again when you get distracted a little more easily. So let's talk about thought first, because it is thoughts that are popping into our mind that actually distract us away from having our concentration in our prayer, right? So let's talk about thought. So thought, actually, we have something like 70,000 thoughts in a day. Not that I've particularly counted them, but that's what I've been told. So we have a lot of thoughts that go through our head, and that's constant. And I really like to use the metaphor, and if I'd thought about it, I would have had the bubble machine going so you could have bubbles in the background to notice it. But I like using the metaphor of bubbles when describing thought. So if you have a bubble machine, the bubbles are constantly coming out all the time. In fact, if I'm really quick, I might actually have a video I can play while I'm telling you this and you can see it. Just give me 2 seconds to see if I can find the bubble video. If I can find the bubble video, I can play it for you. Maybe I can't find it that quickly. No, it's not coming up by the looks of it. That would have been a good thought, but I had it too late. Anyway, let me keep describing it. So you have to just visualize bubbles coming out of a bubble machine constantly. And as the bubbles come out, it's very random, right? We have no control over them being all the same size, whether they even come out one at a time or clumped together, because sometimes they come out all clumped together. And they sort of float for a bit and then they pop. And that's essentially like thought. So thought is like a stream of bubbles that are constantly just coming, through our head. They come randomly, so we can't control thought. There's random thoughts will pop into our head and then they pop. And it's only when we get fixated on a particular thought that those thoughts actually bother us. Because if you think about it, first question to challenge your thinking around thought is, if we have 70,000 thoughts in a day, at the end of the day, if you had to recollect all the things you thought about, how many things could you recollect? It's not going to be many, right? It'll be the key things that you've focused on, that you've put your attention on during the day. But all that other random thinking that's been happening constantly through the day, you just won't be able to put your finger on it to recall what it was, right? So that's the first thing to realize, is that thought is coming randomly, constantly, all the time. And when we are focusing on something, we tend to have more thoughts about that, but it's still lots of individual thoughts. So I give you an example about how that works, right? So if you've ever been looking to buy a car, and in your mind you've got a specific type of car in mind, suddenly you will notice them everywhere. Now, it's not because there are more of those cars on the road now that you've decided to buy one. It's because you're now noticing them. So, for instance, if I decided I wanted a really nice royal blue Toyota Corolla because it's quite a reliable car, probably not now because I have too many kids to cart around, but later on when they've all left home, have my granny car. Actually, I probably still need a big one to cart the grandchildren around. But anyway, back to the thought of a royal blue Toyota Corolla, right? Now that I've had that idea and that thought that that's what I want, suddenly I will notice all the blue Toyota Corollas wherever I go. But before, I wouldn't have noticed them. They would have been there, but I didn't notice them. And it's a bit like thought. When we focus in on something, pay attention to something, we notice all the thoughts around that, and then we tend to have more thoughts around that. And we're oblivious to the other thoughts. And before we'd paid attention to this thinking, we were oblivious to it too. So I'm just sharing with you the nature of thought, because it's thought that disrupts us in our prayer. If we understand the nature of thought, we will be less disrupted by it. That's why I'm unpacking this for you. So what else can I tell you about thought that's going to be helpful? Well, the focus on the bubbles popping. So if we actually don't pay attention to particular thoughts, they just pop, they're gone. That's why we can't recall them at the end of the day. They've just come and gone. So we have no control over it. There's an experiment we could do right now. In fact, let's do it. I'm going to set a timer for 30 seconds. All right. I just have to open up the right app on my phone first. Timer. And we're going to do 30 seconds. Hopefully the sound of it is loud enough for you to hear. Now, once I say go, I only want you to think about blue chickens. Right? Blue chickens. If any other thought pops into your mind, like, I wonder when 30 seconds will be up. Oh, I wonder, it's a bit odd that it's blue chickens. Any thought other than blue chickens, right? For the whole 30 seconds. Let's see if you can hold thinking and focusing in on blue chickens for 30 seconds. Ready, set, go. That was 30 seconds. I actually gave up within about the first 3 seconds because I had a thought other than blue chickens in the first few seconds, because I was looking at the timer and I started focusing on the numbers. So even if you did manage to focus in on blue chickens, I think that if you were really noticing your thoughts, you would have seen other thoughts pop in. But a lot of people will tell me, oh no, I only thought about blue chickens. But how hard was that if you did to just focus on blue chickens? Most of us would have had moments where our mind wandered or a different thought came in and we had to kind of convince ourselves to come back to blue chickens, right? So this little exercise is to help us understand that it is the nature of us as human beings and the way we think to not be able to keep our attention that focused without other thoughts popping in. And so this is the first point in terms of the Khushoo in prayer, is to understand that it's going to be natural, especially considering Shaitan's going to be wanting to distract you every chance he can by reminding you of this and that and the other, for thoughts to pop in while you're focusing on Allah. And so the reason for sharing this with you is the first thing is to do is to be forgiving of ourselves that those thoughts popped in, because we cannot control that. We can be focused. We can minimize that, and we'll talk about how we can minimize it in a minute, but we cannot completely control it. So if a thought, some random thought of some other kind pops in, the first thing is to not get upset with ourselves around it. And I'll tell you why. Just like when I was talking about anxiety, and I was saying that if we start worrying about the physiological symptoms as well, we're adding another layer of thinking. It's the same thing. We've had a thought that's interrupted us. If we now start getting judgmental on ourselves for having that thought, guess what happens? We're now no longer focused on our prayer. We're focused on being judgmental about ourselves. So we're adding another layer of thought. So the reason for that activity is to first get yourself into a state of understanding that it's going to happen. And what we want to do is minimize how often it happens. The second thing is to remember the thought bubbles, is that they pop unless you pay attention to them. So if you pay attention to it, what happens? You get stuck thinking, like there'll be more thoughts like that, and then you'll focus on them more and you'll get more and more distracted. So the second thing is to realize that that thought will pop just like the bubbles pop. So we just ignore it. We don't have to do anything with it. It's going to pop by itself. We don't have to do anything other than let it be, ignore it, let it do its thing, and return back to our attention on Allah. That's simple. If we make it that simple, those distractions will become little moments, not big problems. So I said I'd talk about how we can minimize that. So you can imagine that if you are running around like a headless chook, doing this, doing that, blah, 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 and you're just slotting your prayer in when you can, that your mind is going to be busy when you come to pray, right? And the chances of lots of other thoughts popping in is going to be far greater than if you've come to prayer in a calm state of mind, where your mind has slowed right down. And so factoring our life around our prayer rather than our prayer around our life is an attitude shift that can make a big difference. Because now it's about, okay, I'm going to make sure I'm not hectic around prayer time. And then when it comes to pray, take a moment before you say Allahu Akbar for the first time to just reflect on your state of mind. And one of the things that you can do, because this has a physiological effect on us, is just take 5 really deep, really slow breaths. Maybe even breathe in for the count of 6. So breathing in and then out for 6. Really deep and slow like that. Because what actually happens is when we slow down our breathing, and one of the things with this busy, hectic life that we lead, we're not breathing deeply and properly. We kind of have lots of rapid, shallow breathing. But when we take these deep, slow breaths, you actually notice a shift in feeling calmer because it releases certain chemicals through our body that actually calm us down. So that's a really good thing to do. Another thing that if you're really feeling that you need a way of getting your attention to Allah before you begin, is to just spend a moment noticing the blessings of Allah around you. What have you been blessed with by Allah that day? What are you grateful for today? But because that has us coming out of this dunya and into focusing in on Allah. And then we can start. And one of the other things that is really helpful, I believe, and Allah knows best why He designed the prayer to be the way it is. But I've heard some wisdoms shared around it, which I'll share with you. And, I don't know the validity of it, but it certainly seems very helpful to me. And that is, when we say Allahu Akbar, it doesn't mean Allah is the greatest. It means actually the way it means Allah is greater. So essentially, we're saying Allah is greater than anything else right now. And what I think is really amazing is, when we surrender, when somebody, would point, if somebody pointed a gun at us, I've never had anyone really point a gun at me, but if someone's pointed a gun at us, what do? We go like this, don't we? We put our hands up. It's a sign of surrender. We're surrendering. So if you can understand that when we go Allahu Akbar and we're surrendering to Allah is greater than anything else right now. Remember, feelings come from thought in the moment. This is what I've been sharing with you. So if your thinking is around the fact that I'm surrendering myself to the fact that Allah is greater than anything else right now in this moment, what's the experience you're going to have? You're going to feel that. I'm getting shivers down my spine talking about it. You're going to feel that amazing peace that comes in being in that state of remembrance of Allah. Now you get started, and I actually find that the hardest prayers for me to keep my concentration are the silent ones, that when I'm hearing myself recite out loud, it keeps me on track a lot more than when it's the silent prayers. And so, we've said Allahu Akbar, but then we go into the prayer, and guess what? Multiple times we say Allahu Akbar, don't we? Now, this is the wisdom that was shared with me, whether or not it is what Allah intended. But, the name for us in Arabic is insan, which is from the root word of forgetful. And we need reminders. So throughout the prayer, if we are thinking about what Allahu Akbar means, we are being reminded over and over and over again that Allah is more important than anything else that's popped into our mind. So if we just focus on bringing our attention back every time we say Allahu Akbar, then more and more we're going to end up in a greater state of concentration in our prayer. So the key points for today are understanding the nature of thought. So when a thought pops into our mind in the middle of prayer, we don't take it seriously. We just let it be and it will go. Or that we understand that if we get preoccupied with it, it'll distract us. And that if we get upset with ourselves for having thoughts popping up, even if it's lots of thoughts popping up, the more we get frustrated with ourselves, the more we're taking ourselves away from concentration. And that to be aware of our state of mind as we enter into prayer and factor our life around our prayer rather than our prayer around our life. And then once we feel that we're in a good state of mind, maybe we've taken some deep breaths and had some thinking around what we're grateful for to Allah before we begin, we remember that every time we say Allahu Akbar, we're saying that Allah is greater than anything else. And that's our opportunity to keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back to concentrating in our prayer, inshallah. So that's what I have to share with you today. And I have a number of people here in the room with me. If anyone has a question or would like to share a takeaway, I would love for you to do that, inshallah, before we end the session today. So what did you find helpful? I guess you can type it in the chat if you don't want to come onto the mic.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
You okay, sister?
What did you gain from this discussion today, Nahida?
What I gained was obviously the thought that you said it's just in the time being, the bubbles are, and then obviously it's just your thought. You can take, get rid of it.
We
It's
don't
not
have to get
something
rid
that,
of it, because if you're trying to get rid of it, you're
yeah,
now focusing in on it. You just ignore it. You just
yeah,
don't
you
take
said,
it seriously.
okay. But obviously I find a problem though, Catherine, but when I'm praying, it's like when I have a problem in my head, I I tend to focus on the problem that I'm going through. And when you're upset about something, you it's like the prayer is first. You have to do the prayer, so you go on there and you read. But when I'm upset and sad, I keep thinking about my sadness and my being upset, so I
So,
can't even
so
focus properly at all.
yeah,
I
so
don't know what to do for that.
so the solution to your problem and your sadness is Allah. So isn't it fascinating that we're focused on the problem and the feelings rather than the solution, which is Allah, in those moments? So I think I can't remember which of the days I shared it, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Talaq, and maybe a little bit of focusing on that before you enter into prayer will help you focus on Allah rather than the problem, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that whoever is conscious of Allah, so
Yeah,
that means we want to focus on Allah in our prayer, right? So you are praying, which is fantastic. Alhamdulillah, we want to go to the next step. Whoever is conscious of Allah, Allah will find a way out from them from every difficulty. In other words, thinking about your problem isn't the solution. Thinking about Allah is the solution, right? Because he said, if you're conscious of me, I will give you the solution. And that he will provide from means that you could never imagine, which means that just because you can't see the solution right now doesn't mean there isn't one.
Okay.
And then it goes on to say, and whoever puts their trust in Allah, Allah is sufficient for them. And so the putting the trust in Allah is I'm handing this over to you, Allah, because I can't see a way out of this. And I know you can get me out of this, even though I can't see how.
Catherine, sometimes what happens is, the severity of that problem just like kills you inside, and you can't even concentrate. That's how bad it becomes.
So
So
Nahida, tell me, wait,
yeah,
don't keep going. I'm going to keep interrupting you because the first thing you say is the most relevant thing, and everything else after it is to justify it. And we want to just
okay.
tackle what the thought is that you're having that is your what I call a yeah, but. So everything I've said is true, and now you're saying yeah, but. So let's handle the yeah, but. Because it's good that you're asking them, because I suspect the people who will listen to this may have the same yeah buts, right?
Okay.
So here's the thing. Yes, absolutely. It may be more difficult in those situations, but everything I've shared with you will help you be, sorry, I'm going to sneeze. Alhamdulillah. Ah, um, will help you do the best you can, right? So sometimes, yes, we're going to have troubling times. I'm not denying that. What you said is true as well.
Yeah.
However, part of what will distract us is forgetting the fact that anything is possible for Allah. So even the hardest, most difficult problem we face, Allah can
Yes,
still get us out of it.
that's right.
And while we are in that state, so these are the things that I share with people because it's the way we think about it that leads to the way we experience it. So if you're thinking about it from the perspective of, I don't know how to get out of this, I'm really concerned about what to do about this, and that's what's spinning in your head,
Yeah.
then you're going to experience a very distracted prayer.
Yes, yes. And I get very annoyed and agitated that I didn't even complete the prayer. I complete my prayer, but it feels it's not valid. I
Yes,
didn't
so you're
complete
adding
the right.
extra layers on top.
Yeah,
So if you thought about your problem from a different perspective, your feelings about it will be different. So if you felt about it from the perspective that you're doing your best to be a good servant of Allah, and that Allah has said that He'll get you out of any difficulty, and
yeah,
that I won't necessarily know how, and that He has promised that He will never burden me with more than I can bear, and that He can say be and it is. You get what I mean? All of these different things that are part of the Quran. And if we're thinking
yeah,
about it through that lens, we will experience it differently. It won't be completely off our mind, but there'll be a much calmer experience around it, and a much better chance that we will reach that concentration in our prayer, which will then obviously elevate our opportunity to come out of the problem.
yeah.
And if we are finding it on our mind, well, when we're in sujood, we ask Allah to help us out of the problem. We're like handing it over to Allah while we're in sujood.
Catherine, are we going to be accountable for our thoughts when we are praying? Are we going to be accountable for that? Like in our prayer, you can't help the thoughts, like
Can
you
I
said,
can I
and it's
share
okay.
something
You need to be kind to yourself.
so
Yeah,
Nakida?
yeah,
If we can't control thought, we're not going to be accountable for it. What we're going to be accountable for is what we do after the thought.
Okay.
So if you preoccupy yourself with the fact that you had a thought and distract yourself more from the prayer, you may well
Okay.
be accountable for that,
Okay.
but you
Because
may
there's
not be
some people
accountable.
that study different things and
Well, because a lot of people don't know or understand thought. There's a lot of people out there telling people that they need to control their thinking and turn their negative thinking into positive thinking. And then people are walking around trying to do that and not succeeding, and then getting themselves into more of a muddle because then they've got thinking around that. When you understand the nature of thought, as I just explained it today, you stop taking thoughts so
yeah,
seriously. And so the thoughts come and go, boom, just like that. And it's not a distraction. That thought comes and goes so quickly that it doesn't distract you. You're still focused on Allah. But when
thank you.
people are telling
Thank you so
people
much.
you have to control your thoughts, what do they focus on? Not on Allah. They
Yeah.
focus on trying to control their thoughts.
Yes.
So when you notice that yourself getting caught up in your problems, then reminding
Yeah.
yourself in that moment that Allah is sufficient for
Yeah.
you, that He can find the way out for you, is bringing
Yeah.
you back to thinking about Allah and concentrating on Allah, isn't it?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's changing.
In the prayer when yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, in the prayer, because a thought just takes a moment. So if you notice yourself going down that path, and
Yeah.
it'll happen, because maybe something happened just before you prayed and you can't get it
Yeah,
out of your
that's
head.
it. Yeah,
And
that's it.
so you that's it's got hold of you. And then you
Yeah.
realize, oh, it's got hold of me.
Yeah.
In that moment of, oh, it's got hold of me, instead
Yeah.
of, oh, now I've ruined my prayer and all this other thinking
Yeah.
that's actually ruining your prayer. You just remember, okay, Allah is sufficient for me. He's going to find a way out for me. And you just get
Mhm.
back onto your prayer. You've turned your thinking towards Allah, haven't you? And so you are in the remembrance of Allah now. You're back concentrating.
Now that is so true because because I've concentrated on the problem and then on top of that another problem that I didn't even help my own self. I've ruined my prayer as well. I didn't concentrate even on the prayer. And then I start crying in the prayer then that I did that as well on top of that.
Yeah. And of course, you know, you ask Allah to forgive you for being distracted. So when you're in
Yeah,
sujood, use the
yeah,
opportunity in sujood to ask Allah to
yeah,
forgive you for being distracted and coming to the prayer and in not the best mindset, and ask Him to
yeah,
help you with your problems, because then you're
yeah.
handing
I
it
was
over
just
to Allah
asking
in
him
the
today.
in the right moment. Pardon?
I was just asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala today the very same thing that helped me in my
Mm.
prayer
Yeah,
that I get it right. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so
And
much.
the more forgiving we are towards ourselves for being
Yeah,
human, the more on track we become. The more we upset with ourselves for having human moments, the
yeah,
more we've come away from what we want in our prayer. So it's
okay.
actually counterintuitive. We think that by focusing on trying to concentrate, that we're going to concentrate
Yeah,
better. No, if we focus on how beautiful relationship with Allah, that's when we will find our prayer, right? Not on trying to focus, but just on thinking about Allah.
that's right.
And
Thank
as
you
I
so
said at the
much.
beginning,
Thank
as a
you.
disclaimer, I am no expert at having good concentration in my prayer. But I do know that by not beating myself up about it and getting preoccupied with it, that I do a much better of coming back on track easily. by understanding the power of thought, or the nature of thought, I mean, that I get back on track more easily. And isn't that what we want to do? We want to make sure that as many of the moments of prayer are in concentration, the more that, so
Yes.
we have messed up a whole raka of prayer because we were distracted, that we don't mess the rest of them up. We just get back into it. It's just like, oh, okay, I went down that path. Never mind. Bismillah, keep going. I mean, Allah Akbar, keep going.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So Muhammad is sharing that he was a similar to a situation, but things changed when he started being grateful. Exactly. When we start counting our blessings and noticing what is, it's so much easier to concentrate in your prayer than when you're focused on what isn't. And being focused on your prayer, on your problems, is being focused on what isn't going well. So focus on what is going well, and it'll be a different experience, subhanAllah. Well, Jazakallah khair for your engagement with me in this session. I hope it's been beneficial to everyone, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Hopefully, inshallah. My daughter gives birth today, so I'll be with you tomorrow. She's hung in overnight, so I was able to be here, but who knows what's going to happen today, because she's most definitely on the way. Alhamdulillah. So I get to meet my grandson, inshallah, sometime today. But if I'm not here tomorrow, then you'll just know that that's what's happened, and that I will record what we miss and upload it whenever I can during the day. But inshallah, I will be here tomorrow. I can tell you the topic. The topic tomorrow is freedom from the shackles of the past. Oh, that's a good one. Excited about that, because people believe that their past is going to cause them grief forever. I'm going to burst that bubble for people, inshallah.
Now that's a good one. Inshallah, we'll
Yeah,
look forward to that one.
inshallah. All
Okay.
right. See you tomorrow, inshallah.